It's Rick without the K. James presents, in my opinion, podcast.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. Thank you for watching. One thing that I wanted to ask you, and Barbie downstairs, one of the bartenders, she was like, "You gotta ask him, right?" And I was like, "Okay." She knows I opened for Charlie Murphy,
Sure.
and for the viewers that don't know, you did that Brown and Dirty tour with him,
Black and Brown.
and well, they changed the name or whatever, right?
Time to get that.
And then we were just wondering because he kind of kept it to himself.
He did.
But
You talking about the sickness?
Yes.
He kept it not only from us, but his children too. Like no one.
Oh. And I guess he didn't want nobody because he had just recently lost a wife as well, right? So
it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I thought the saddest thing about it is that when we went to the funeral, the children were really shocked because, and I think to a great degree we were too, because Charlie convinced us that everything was cool and he was going to be all right, and we believed him. Charlie Murphy is unequivocally the greatest storyteller I've ever seen. There's never that I'm aware been a greater storyteller. You have to go back to Mark Twain to have as great a story. That's how this cat was the greatest storyteller I've ever seen.
Would you mind sharing one of those stories? And that's what I was going to ask you.
I remember, and Charlie was like, I remember when we were leaving. I forgot what city, but we were all going through the metal detectors at an airport, and it's me, Charlie, and an old black dude. This dude had to be 80-something years old, and Charlie used to wear remember he used to wear the long
the chain?
wallet chain,
yeah.
and so this old black dude, I ain't finna let this sissy take off all them belts and straps. And Charlie said, I'm gonna whoop your ass, old man. I'm gonna show you why you're an old man. I go, Charlie, you can't fight. This dude 85 years old. He said, you wouldn't fight an old man? I said, no, Charlie, I wouldn't. I would not fight a fucking old man in the middle of the airport. No. But it like when we were on tour, it was great to be with George Lopez and Sid the Entertainer and Charlie and me and Eddie Griffin. It was great, but the best part of performing together was the icing on the cake. But after, joints would be closed, and it'd be 5 o'clock in the morning before we get out. And we got to get on the plane and go to the next gig. But that's just how there was that kind of camaraderie. And we would just say something, and Charlie could tell you the stories for hours. And it was out of all the touring I've ever done, I've never had more fun than with George, Sid, and Eddie and Charlie.
I've asked. I'm real good friends with Freeze, and
Freeze,
and Freeze would just tell me some stories, and he'd be like, "Whatever you saw on stage, man, was a tenth of the funniness that you saw behind."
He was the
scene.
funniest the greatest storyteller I've ever seen.
Oh,
ever, bar none.
I think that's where Eddie got it from, huh?
Yeah. Maybe.
So, you did bring up something that I wanted to ask, and not because I don't think that you guys would have been as great, but I think I worded the question something like, if you had to do the Kings of Comedy nowadays, do you think it would be successful? And I only ask that because I look up to a comedian like you. You guys were where anybody that I wanted to be in this comedy game. And now I feel like since I've started comedy, you can see the laughter change, and it irritates me. And I think you might have even said it in a different podcast. It irritates me because it's funny nowadays, but people don't want to laugh because they're afraid someone else will feel a certain way.
Anybody knows what's funny, and I don't know that that's the goal. And I think it's arrogant to believe that you know what people should laugh at. But I will say this.
Okay.
I know how I feel. And I know what I believe. And I think my goal has never been necessarily it's arrogant to believe that you should get a certain response. You should be appreciative of whatever response it is. It could be, but just like your body physiologically doesn't know the difference between a sneeze and an orgasm, I don't think you should know the difference between a boo and a laugh. They shouldn't feel distinctively different to you, because it's an arrogant thing to believe that I wrote this and you should respond this way because I'm that great and shit. So I think the more honest interaction is I'll take what the audience feels like I deserve.
And maybe I worded it wrong. So,
I got it.
but I appreciate the game being told. I think just for me, it's one of those things where I feel like we're spoon feeding the audience sometimes.
Well, I think your generation has a specific dynamic that wasn't prevalent when we came up. Now, audiences have phones and again technology, where you could say something in a setting, and all of a sudden it could be, just
clipped out,
programmed all over the world, and all of a sudden there is a piece of something or part of something that becomes something you didn't intend. And even that, you have to understand, it's part of what happens. But I think what has happened, particularly with younger people, the audiences train them. We kind of train the audience. The audiences tell you what they'll accept now, and there's a reticence to go beyond that. George Carlin said, I want to drag an audience that didn't want to go across the line they think is uncrossable. I want to drag them kicking and screaming across that line, and then have them be happy they came with me. And I think that was our mindset. He articulated, but that was our mindset. Yours, I'm talking about generationally, this era of comedy has a different kind of ethos with the audience. You kind of try to stay, they train you about where the landmines are, and you either will stay away from them or not. But it's the audience directing the film as opposed to you doing it.
I totally believe all that. And I think that's where I'm pushing back with it, where I'm just like, for me, some of the comics that I do comic with are like, well, you got to write clean, or you got to do this, or you got to
do what you do.
And I'm like, I want my audience to find me, because the ones that do appreciate my comedy will come on my social media or come up after the show.
Even the ones who appreciate your comedy now won't be the same ones who appreciate it sets from now, or gigs from now, or specials from now. Your skin tomorrow, even though it looks the same, isn't going to be the same. You'll wake up with a different skin. Everything about you will be different. This moment that just passed is going to be different. And the best thing I've done is I never marry moments. I mean, I embrace them. I want them. I try to maximize them to the extent that I can. But to be married to what you were denies who you can be. And so you got to realize it's a fluid thing. An audience that digs you now might not dig something that you do later. Like, you have music artists that you love, their first 3 or 4 albums, then something happens and you all of a sudden aren't as invested in it. And that's just kind of a dynamic.
Like Kanye?
Yeah.
So, no, makes much sense. And thank you for sharing that. It gives me a different way of thinking about it, because, I'm struggling with that myself right now.
Where I just struggle. Having a restless soul creatively is the best thing for you. Certainty and comfort are the death knell of creativity and expansion. If you're certain and you're confident, you could appear confident, you could play confident, but to be certain that you're actually on the right path means that you don't take new information, you don't take a moment for what it is, and you have this arrogance to believe that you know. All you know right now is how you feel right now. So I think to marry a moment in time, to remember it is obviously great. To be nostalgic about it is great. But to marry it and think that it is the end all be all, or you want to replicate it, I think it's the death knell of creativity.
Well said.
Boy, Charlie Murphy, my main man, Ric James. That's the one you think, the comedian Ric James. Get up.
I can't hear my neighbor crying, I can't breathe.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. Thank you for watching.